Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. That's a bunch of house sparrow fledglings. They're funny. It's mid-August and it's time to direct sow our fall green beans. Now these are heirloom contender bush beans from my own seeds. I've been saving seeds for several years. I want to space them 4 inches apart. And I've already measured it out and set up these stakes. And I want to space my rows 24 inches apart. Because they're a big seed, you want to plant them 1/2 to 1 inch deep. Green beans prefer full sun, and in this area, they're going to get full sun. They prefer temperatures 70 to 80 degrees, and that's perfect because most of our 90-degree days are over. We might have some once in a while. They're going to germinate in 7 to 14 days. Now I'm going to put a net over them to prevent birds from pulling them up and animals digging in this area. Now once they grow pretty tall and they're established, I'll take off the net and the hoops because they're going to get 12 to 20 inches tall. They're going to bush out 12 to 18 inches wide. And because their genetics comes from a pole bean decades ago, every once in a while you're going to get a vine. It's in their genes. This heirloom 1949 bush bean produces a 5 to 6 inch long, tender, stringless bean. They prefer fertile soil, but you don't have to feed them because they produce their own nitrogen. My soil's very rich in organic matter because I raised quail here for 4 years. Right now, daytime temperatures are in the 80s and the 70s, and that's perfect because they will stop setting flowers over 90 degrees. That makes fall the perfect time to grow green beans. I'm going to harvest them when they're young and thin and tender before the bean swells up in about 50 days. So we should be able to get a harvest before mid-October, when we have our first frost. Now, my experience, they do need some support because as they get heavy, they will tilt over. So I've got these stakes all ready to go. Now keep the seeds moist, and then after germination, they're going to need 1 inch of water a week. We're going to add organic Sluggo to protect from pill bugs, slugs, and snails. Now let's cover up the tunnel with the netting to keep out the wildlife. Good morning, Judith here, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's time to tie up our green beans. I'm going to use these zip ties. That's the easiest way for me. Now these were direct sown at the end of August. I love my birds. That young catbird was actually born here, and every morning he calls to me. The seeds germinated in just a few days. These plants are 4 weeks old. They're developing flower buds. I spaced the green beans 4 inches apart, and I added these support stakes before I sowed the seeds. This variety is heirloom contender green beans. It's a bush variety. But you will see some small vines, like over here. That's because bush beans, they were all developed from vining beans. It's in their genes. I'll come back later, and as the plants grow and these zip ties get too tight, I'll snip them off and adjust them. These should be ready to harvest mid-October, in about a month. Now remember when we sowed these, we covered it with a mesh net. We did that because we didn't want the squirrels, the animals, to dig, but fortunately we did that because 3 weeks ago we had a hailstorm, and if it wasn't for that netting, it would have destroyed these plants. They were still small. Now the net, it did poke through all of these supports, but the plants themselves, they were fine. I'll come back and sheet mulch with cardboard over here. But for now, the weeds aren't bad. It's because this area is getting less afternoon sun because we still have okra growing along this side. Speaking of squirrels, that looks much better. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's time to harvest some green beans. I want to harvest some of the young, thin, immature beans, like this one. These are good too. I've actually could have started harvesting last week. That's from only 3 plants. I think I'm gonna need a bigger container. It's now mid-October, and I direct sowed these 8 weeks ago at the end of August. The variety is Heirloom Contender Bush Green Beans. Now, if it was spring or summer, I would leave the bigger pods and let them develop into seeds to save for using next year. But in the fall, I don't think there's enough time. Typically in spring and summer, I'll leave the first 5 plants and I won't touch them. I'll leave those to dry and develop into seed for next year. Now this is a bush bean variety, but they do need support. And 3 weeks ago, I tied them up. I think we need to go get a bigger basket. Now the lettuce we just transplanted, the skunk has already dug it up and ate it. I am not happy. There's only one poor little guy left. Now here in north central Maryland, zone 6B, 7A, fall green beans, they're so easy to grow. I don't have to water them or feed them or anything. Now I did sow them in full sun. I can feel that. It's helped them grow to their full height, between 2 and 2.5 feet. So they've already reached full size. Now these little guys are shorter because the afternoon sun gets blocked in this area. But they're still full of beans. Now I told you that bush beans will develop small vines. Now they're not a pole bean, but that is in their genetics because they all came from pole beans way back. But let me show you an example of what I was talking about. Now the last plant, I think I'm going to leave those bigger beans. I don't think they'll mature, but we'll see. After you harvest, check one more time. Green beans like to hide. There's a few small beans, and I'm going to leave those. I don't know if we're going to have time to get a second set of flowers, but definitely in the summer and spring, you'll get a second flowering on your green bean plants. I was thinking about covering these with fleece. Protect them from the frost, but to be honest, I still had plenty of canned green beans from last year that I home canned. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. My name is Judith and today is October 26th and time for our last green bean harvest. Now for about 8 nights we've had a frost. But the green beans have survived with a little bit of damage. Let me show you. The important thing to remember the morning after you've had a frost, don't touch the plants. Let the sun come out and warm them up. And if you want to harvest, wait until later in the day. We harvested these together 11 days ago, and we left the small beans, and they did grow. I'm going to pull the plants up one by one after I harvest the beans so I can see the next plant's beans easier. Now we left those big beans to see if they would mature so we could save them for seed, but like we thought, there wasn't enough time. If you want to save green bean seeds, do that with your spring and summer crop. Now this one is kind of big and I doubt that it's good for eating. After I wash these beans, we'll snap them, and the ones that snap, sorry about the camera jiggling, if they snap easily, I'll go ahead and use them. But the ones that are really bendy like that, they'll probably just go straight into the compost. Remember the vine that we saw that had hooked onto the strawberries? And I told you that bush beans, these are contender bush green beans, they will make short vines. Now 11 days ago, there weren't any beans on that vine, but we have some that have developed. I mentioned in our recent harvest video that spring and summer green beans will produce a second set of flowers. But in the fall, they've not had enough time. Our recent harvest, we got 6 pounds of green beans, which turned into 8 pints of pressure canned beans. Now, if this is your first time growing green beans and you're curious how to cook them, I have a video where we used canned green beans with bacon, just like my mom used to make. I made a video on how to pressure can green beans, and we're going to make a video blanching and freezing these beans. Hopefully after that, we'll cook some with ham hock and do a video of cooking them from fresh. My neighbor's tomatoes are still alive. They've survived the frost, and I think those are the tomatoes that we gave the community for free. Now, if you're curious on how we use all the vegetables we grow, check our playlist tab. We have a playlist for each of our veggies, and specifically for the green beans, I'll add that green bean playlist in the description, and it covers about growing them and how to use them. Bush green beans still need some support. And I tend to use these, I think they're 3-foot, 3-foot stakes. We have 2 plants left to harvest. What are we going to do with all the old plants? We're going to chop them up and put them in the compost. Not bad. Now we can lay down new cardboard and be all ready for the spring. We'll put some mulch on top of it too. I'll come back later and chop these up, but not today. Thank you for visiting Withrow Urban Homestead. See you later. Bye-bye.